Laura Flaquette of Soltar Solutions, and today I am here on Focus Forward with a guest that I have been waiting to have on this show. I'm so excited about this topic. It is amazing. Today I have with us Jeff Sweeney, who is co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of East West Manufacturing. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us today.
Good morning, Lori. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. I've been waiting for this show for a long, long time. So Jeff, tell us exactly what East West Manufacturing does.
Well, we're a global contract manufacturer, and we exist to make our customers more competitive. We've developed a business model we call domestic offshore manufacturing, which really is, what that means is we find the optimum place to manufacture a product and help our customers get that product manufactured, whether it's in our own facility, in theirs, or some combination of the two.
So isn't that taking jobs away from the American public?
No, not really. You know, if done right, we call it not a zero-sum game. I would say that most of our customers have actually grown their manufacturing presence domestically by strategically using somebody like an East West to make them more competitive. Perhaps it's sourcing a small subassembly or a component of a finished good that they're making. And by using us as a competitiveness tool, or a company like an East West, they in turn grow jobs, sell more product, add shifts, and really the whole pie grows for everybody.
Wow, that sounds great. So now, explain exactly how that is. Like, what kind of component would you be talking about? Give us a rundown on what that would mean.
Sure, I'll give you an example here, and hopefully this will show up okay on the monitor. This is kind of what started the whole idea of there's a best place to manufacture something for me. That little widget was manufactured by a company in Miami for, let's say, round numbers, $1 a piece. The company I worked for acquired them. We automated, changed the way that product was manufactured, spent a good bit of engineering and capital dollars, and we drove down the cost to 80 cents each. And we were patting ourselves on our backs and very happy with that. Around that time, I made my first contact with people who manufactured products offshore. And the very first time we had that product quoted out of China, it was 60 cents each. And the light bulb went off right then and there that there are some products that are best made in other locations. Then to round out that story, we looked at another 20 or 30 different products, and it became very evident that some of them were a best fit for China, some were a best fit for India, some maybe for parts of Europe, and then some were a perfect fit to stay right where they were here at home in the US. And that's when it occurred to me that really for every product, there's a best place or a best combination of places in which to manufacture that. And that really is what, that spawned the business model for East West.
So are you concerned at all about intellectual property and patents? Because that's been a huge issue with doing business globally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something you need to be aware of, and you need to protect yourself. A few things have changed in the last 5 or 6 years. China joined the WTO, and in doing so, they actually have put in place a pretty robust means to protect IP within China. Practically speaking, though, that still means you'd have to go try to sue somebody in China for infringing. That could be a challenge. There are other steps you can take beyond patents. One is to work with somebody you trust. One of the value adds East West offers our customer base is they're working with an American company that manages all that in Asia. It gives them somebody to trust and to deal with. The other thing you can do is strategically, know who you're dealing with. Try to be important enough to a supplier that he has reasons not to try to burn you. And that means you probably don't want to have just one thing in a factory and be a very tiny percentage of his production. He has nothing to lose then by burning you. So really, you really want to get to know your suppliers. You want to be important enough to them that they have no reason to try to hurt you that way.
So Jeff, one question I have for you is, it sounded to me when we first started talking like some of the components were being made in other parts of the world. So one component might be in China, one component might be in India, one component might be in Turkey, for instance, And then they're assembled, if I understand correctly, they're assembled here in the United States. Is that right?
Yeah, that is one huge part of our business model. I'd say for the vast majority of our customers, we supply components or sub-assemblies that they are building into their finished goods, putting together in a factory here or in Europe. We have customers in Europe as well as North America. And then for some customers, we may also source or manufacture complete finished goods, and they would blend that into the things that they make and sell themselves. That in turn allows them to grow and be more competitive with a larger product offering to their customer base.
Okay, so most of the time things are made components outside the U.S. and assembled here in the U.S. Is that right?
Yeah, for our model, yes. Our customer base is largely manufacturers. We deal with companies that develop products and make things themselves. So there's no greater fan of a strong manufacturing base in the States than us. That's our customer base.
Okay, so when we look at it, it seems like that would be an additional security measure because the components that are being made are not solely assembled there. So they're doing basically a piece of the larger whole. So that seems like there would be an extra security measure with that. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a good point. And we have even had some customers very specifically say, don't give more than this percentage of the product components to any given country or any given supplier. And they've relied on us then to kind of split up the supply base to maybe 4 or 5 different factories or suppliers, maybe spread between China, Vietnam, and India. And you're very correct in that it prevents exposure of the IP or the heart and soul of the product to any individual supplier. So it greatly reduces the risk of anything happening.
Yeah, see, that's what I like. That's exactly what I like about your model is that you maintain the intellectual property right here in your own company. And what you're doing is you're just putting your pieces out to be manufactured in other places, bringing it back and creating it here. So I have a question about that. What is your sweet spot for your company? That's the first question. And then the other thing is, how does just a small company that's here in the U.S., how do they get started to work with a company like yours?
Sure, and those questions are related. I would say that the greatest obstacle for a small company, and I'll tie that back to kind of what our sweet spot is, the greatest obstacle for a small company, probably two. One is just knowing who to deal with, perhaps being intimidated about getting on a plane or dealing with 12-hour time zone or severe jet lag, language barriers. That's one. But the other one that really comes into play is our minimum order quantities. Most low-cost manufacturing parts of the world deal in high volume. And there can be many hurdles to overcome for a smaller company getting to a volume for both production and logistics and supply chain management reasons that is a good fit with offshore. What we try to do is lower that threshold a little bit for our customers by doing a lot of combining. We can go to a factory, whether it's our own facility or one we work with in Asia, with the combined volumes of 4 or 5 customers who buy similar things. And we can lower the threshold or the barrier of entry for them. And then do the same thing with freight. Freight and logistics costs can be as much as 10 or 15% of the landed cost of getting something from Asia to here. That's very expensive if you're buying freight in small quantities. We can consolidate freight from 10 different factories into one container, eventually going to 20 different customers.
Well, I was wondering about that as well, because the combining effort would really drive the price down and make it very, feasible. The other question I have is, do you find sometimes it's not price is the most important thing? Could it also be trade agreements between countries that would delineate who you would be doing business with for certain components? Does that affect it at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, the trade agreement side or tariffs and duties absolutely plays into, with price, into the landed cost. Our customers really should, and we advise them to look more at landed cost of a component or a subassembly, not just the price. To the price in China or Vietnam, you're going to add freight, which again, it could be 10 or 15%. And then you're going to add duty rates, which can range, depending upon how good the lobbyist is for that industry. It could be zero or it could be, punitive upwards of 15 or 20%. So you want to blend those together to come up with a true landed cost. And then even beyond that, cost is not really the only criterion on which a suitable fit should be judged. You've got quality, of course, whether or not the technology fit works in a low-cost manufacturing country. Then there are things like scalability, raw material availability. There are a whole host of criteria that need to be measured to determine the best place in which to manufacture something. It's not just about cost.
No, it's not just about cost. See, I find this so fascinating. So at your company, you weigh all those variables and all those situations to come up with the best possible scenario. Is that right for your customer?
It is. We start the process of selling really on a consultative basis. We go into a potential customer and we really want to look at what their supply chain, how it's built today, and look for opportunities to make it better for them. And that better could mean lower cost, it could mean higher reliability, it could mean higher quality, or all of the above. And what we found is the lasting relationships with our customer base really come from starting, not by selling, but more about asking questions and consulting.
Fascinating, fascinating. Okay, so what do you see the future of your business, of globalization, of the global trade? What do you see happening with that?
Yeah, I see a future in continued flattening of the world. I think Friedman was right. From a business and manufacturing perspective, the world is very, very flat. And what we're finding globally is developing countries, depending upon how long they've been at the manufacturing game, are climbing higher and higher up the value chain. Somebody like a China, they are not interested in making low-value goods anymore. Their interest now is in making tablets and laptops and flat-screen TVs and robotics parts. Where somebody like us in Vietnam, we're more interested in where China was maybe 5 or 10 years ago. Simpler assemblies, just getting into making electronics. We're just getting into making some medical devices now in Vietnam, where 10 years ago China was the only game in town. And then beyond that, you've got places like Laos and Cambodia, eventually parts of Africa, once they kind of get their political act together and improve their infrastructure. They're going to be on those very low rungs of the value ladder. Well, you'll start to see cut and sew operations and very simple things done in that part of the world.
So this is I find this very fascinating. So in looking at it, what do you think the impact of your business is in those countries that you're working? What do you see? You've been doing this for a while. What have you seen the impact of the business that you're doing, the influx? What has happened in those areas?
Yeah, I think it can be an agent for positive change. I think a few things, and I'll use China as an example. A business relationship is a great way to forge a relationship and to have the two countries engaged and getting to know each other a little more. I go to China and I view our employees there, our suppliers there, as just business colleagues and nothing else. I don't see a competitiveness. I don't see a political or geopolitical discord at all with them. And I think business is one way. I also think certainly social media in these countries, even though they're kind of unofficially suppressed, you still can get on YouTube and Facebook in China. And I think the combination of those things, where it's just interaction with the rest of the world, or that's what's going to eventually bring about positive change. And I've certainly seen it happen in China. We're starting to see that in Vietnam as well.
So when we look at that, do you feel that the education level of the workers in some place like China, where we just had an idea of thousands of people just sitting here doing this all day long, have you seen that the education level for the employee, for the average factory worker, has risen, or has it stayed the same?
Yeah, I'd say it's risen across the board. Factory workers in China, they're going up the same ladder that Japan went up 30 years ago, and the same kind of industrial development ladder that workers in the U.S. went up 50 to 100 years ago, and that is the jobs are becoming higher skilled. That requires more training and more knowledge. Certainly, it requires more technical help and engineers. China is graduating engineers at a pace that is far ahead of anywhere else in the world. And ultimately, that may be their biggest advantage, more than the low-cost labor, is that they've got this huge pool of technical engineering talent graduating from their universities.
I was amazed when I was in Morocco, I don't know, a few years ago, and I was traveling from Marrakesh, driving actually from Marrakesh up to Tangier, and there are whole cities that are built around these industrial parks. They're not really industrial parks. Basically, they're just office centers, but they're huge. It looks like, the projects, in the United States would be, and they're just offices, one after the other, just these huge parks. And I know that they're going to be like phone centers. They're going to be this. They're going to all these places. The amount of education that's going to have to take place in that country is going to hugely affect the economic system in that country. It's going to affect the politics. It's going to affect everything in that country. Because when you take a group of people that maybe only speak one language, or they may be sub-educated, I'm overgeneralizing, but when you take those people and you have to raise them to a level to put them in those office buildings, to be able to do the work that an office worker, you're raising that level. So I noticed that in China. When I was in China, I said, these people are really going to experience a major change. And it's kind of what you're saying. So how can we, the small business owner, how can we positively affect that change? I'm just, this is kind of an off-the-wall question, but I'm just curious about it.
I think by getting involved, by realizing, even as a small business owner or a small company, that it is a global marketplace, both in terms of where you sell and where you source your goods. Gone are the days that you've got to be a multi-billion-dollar corporation to effectively either sell across borders or source across borders. We do manufacturing for companies that are as small as $5 million a year in sales. And they are very effectively utilizing the world as their marketplace to make themselves more competitive. So I would say the number one thing they could do is get involved and realize that the hurdles are much, much lower than they were 5-10 years ago.
So when you say get involved, what exactly do you mean? Are there organizations that you're involved with? Are there websites to go to? I mean, how would the average small business owner start to learn about that?
Sure, I think you can do research in a lot of different places. The internet's a great one. Look for trade shows in the country that you're interested in, either in selling to or sourcing from. Get involved in local business organizations. I know in Atlanta, we're affiliated with chambers of commerce that have bilateral agreements and arrangements with India, China, and Vietnam. It's very easy to find an industry group that's meeting that would connect folks interested in doing business in China and those interested in doing business in the States. I could probably find one 3 days a week here in Atlanta. So I'm sure those resources exist. The other thing is, don't be afraid to get on a plane and go. Schedule a trip. Try to have a couple of anchor events. Maybe it's a trade show. Maybe it's 1 or 2 meetings. But don't be afraid to get on a plane, schedule a week or two, and just go.
Didn't you tell me that you did that? I think you had a pretty interesting story about that.
Yeah, I did. Actually, we did as a company. I didn't do it personally, but when we were first interested in getting involved in Vietnam, prior to the early 2000s, our manufacturing was pretty much limited to China only. We knew there were certain things in Vietnam that we could get done more competitively than China. And one of them was rubber parts manufacturing. Vietnam has indigenous rubber trees. They have raw materials there. We knew rubber parts would be more competitive there. We made millions of dollars worth of rubber parts in China. So to investigate Vietnam, my business partner and the guy who's kind of our Marco Polo, who runs our Asian operations, they knew nobody in Vietnam. They got on a plane, they booked a hotel for 3 nights. They got down there and they found phone books and other online resources to get factory names to visit. The next day they hired a driver basically a glorified taxi for the day. They hired an interpreter, and they drove around to these factories, knocked on doors, and just didn't take no for an answer. And out of that came our first 2 supplier relationships, which ultimately led to us establishing an office there with a dozen people. And now today we have 3 factories, 150,000 square feet, and a couple hundred workers, all from that one trip.
That's an amazing story. That's an amazing story. So, wow. I don't know about that, but that's an amazing story. So I guess if you want to do something, strong enough, if you really have that urge and you really want to do it, it's a great idea to just do it. And as you said, not take no for an answer. So it's very brave. Mm-hmm. So the next question I have is, how would somebody start the process of working with a company like yours? Like, how would that happen?
Yeah. Sure. For working with us, that's the best example I can give because it's my company. But pick up the phone and have a conversation. That's how we start every engagement with a prospective customer. So I would, if somebody has an interest in either selling to or sourcing from low-cost parts of the world, Google's a great tool. Google companies that do that. Google contract manufacturing in Vietnam or injection molding in China. Talk to a half dozen or a dozen companies over the phone, get a comfort level with the ones that you think are a good fit, and then either invite them to come see what you're doing or go see what they're doing. They're really planning and research is great, but ultimately there's no substitute for action.
Never. Okay, so that's really good. So you would actually send someone to a specific company if you thought that they could be a right fit. And then when you're looking at their process, you'd probably be able to see right away what could be outsourced. Maybe they wouldn't even know.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best, tools for us from a sales perspective, and I think one of the most valuable tools from our customers' perspective, is to let us go out and kind of walk their factory floor, walk their warehouse shelves, and look for opportunities of very obvious low-hanging fruit that would be a good candidate for a first project. And that's the other thing is, start small, start with something that has a lot of impact right away. It's easier for everybody to grow what they're doing, both from the supplier and the customer perspective, if you have an easy early success.
Excellent. Now, the next question, we're going to be wrapping up pretty soon, but I just want like 3 quick tips that the average business owner could use to kind of take that plunge. So maybe something that they could think about that they would normally miss.
Sure. I guess I'll wear my entrepreneurial hat, and I'll put aside the offshore manufacturing hat for this because I am a serial entrepreneur as well as a manufacturer. I guess the 3 biggest things, number 1, I would say is have a very good idea of what your business model is and how your potential market values that model. I'm less concerned about the detailed, 20-page Harvard business plan, but, have an idea of what your model is. In our case, our model was we're going to figure out where the best place is to make something, and we're going to end up making that for our customer.
That's basically 101. That's 101 for every business. You know what I mean? And so many businesses just miss it.
It's very obvious, but it is very much overlooked. You have to make sure you understand what your model is, what value it adds to your prospective customer base, and then you have to test that. You have to make sure that that customer base truly values it. And we had the good fortune of doing it for the company we worked for before we spun East West off separately. So we were able to test that model. I guess the second point I would say would be, as you grow, hire a talented team and don't be afraid to delegate to them. As we have grown from 5 people here in Atlanta to now 30 in Atlanta and 400 worldwide, our growth really come because we've hired very good people and we've given them plenty of latitude, plenty of freedom to succeed or fail on their own.
Well, that's brilliant. That's great advice. Thank you so much for being with us today, Jeff. It was wonderful. So I want everybody who's interested in finding out about the possibility of outsourcing, absolutely take that plunge. Check out companies, work with people that can really help you to make that to make that leap, because it could mean a huge difference for your business. So thanks so much for being with us today, Jeff.
Well, great. Thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. So that's it today for Focus Forward. I hope you've enjoyed our show. I've certainly enjoyed being here. So thanks so much. Bye-bye now.